members of Parliament, support staff, TV viewers, radio listeners, all following this meeting via social media, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to this Central Committee meeting number 22 for today, Monday, June 9th, 2025. At this time, I want to give a special word of welcome to the members of the Council of Ministers who are here with us. The Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, Dr. Luc Mercilina, the Minister of Finance, Ms. Marinka Gums, and their respective support staff. We have established a quorum of 11 members, and I invite you to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Thus far, I have received a notice of absence from the member Otley and a lateness, a notice of lateness from the member Otley. And are there any notifications from the floor at this time? I see we have firstly up for notifications, MP York. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you, the griffier, the ministers, and the support staffs, and the attendant in the tribune, and also the viewing public. Madam Chair, I'd also like to make mention of a notice of lateness for MPs Duran and Arian. Thank you.
Thank you, MP York. I continue, and I give the floor to MP Lewis for notifications.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning to the Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable Minister of Finance. Good morning, colleagues, and those in the tribune and the listening and viewing public of St. Maarten. I would like to give my sincere condolences to the young man that tragically passed away yesterday based on a bike accident. It again alerts us that we need to do something with the bike riders and provide the necessary roads and sports facilities when it comes to motorcycles. Also, notification based on my person, my family. 2 weeks ago, 2 Fridays ago before I traveled, my family residence on the French side was burnt down. So my mom, my aunt, my uncle, my brothers were all devastated because of this. And I just ask you all for your prayers for my family. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Lewis. The next member of Parliament to make use of notifications is MP Myers, to whom I give the floor at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to my colleagues in Parliament, the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, and your support staff, those of you listening via social media, and those of you in the tribune, good morning. I just want to take this opportunity, Madam Chair, to congratulate Casey Carty on his 3 centuries in the cricket match. He has emerged as one of, or arguably one of the best batsmen in cricket today. And he's a product of St. Maarten, and I think as such, congratulations is in order. The record he broke was set many years ago by Vivian Richards, who was known as the greatest batsman in cricket. So as such, for a young man to be able to accomplish that, 3 centuries, it's something that's astronomical. So congratulations to the West Indies team, and in particular, our very own Casey Carty.
Thank you, MP Myers. And before continuing with the agenda points for today, I join my colleagues in terms of the congratulatory words spoken, as well as the words of empathy spoken by members of Parliament. And in a very special way, I want to, in adding to the congratulatory messages, I want to congratulate a member of staff, a member of the parliamentary staff, Miss Brenda Maynard, with the publication as a co-author of a book. And thus here at Parliament, we're extremely proud of this achievement, as I also recognize the many works, different works and community works that members of staff of Parliament are engaged in. So to all of you, I say congratulations, and to Brenda on this feat in particular, sincerest congratulations from all of us here. So as we continue with the agenda for this meeting, the Central Committee meeting of Parliament, the agenda being 2 agenda points. The first one, approval of the composition of a delegation and provisions for this delegation to attend the celebration of Curaçao Flag Day on July 2nd, 2025. This is document number IS 1107, and it's dated June 2nd, 2025. The second agenda point is the national ordinance stipulating the budget for country St. Maarten for the service year 2025, national ordinance, budget 2025. The number of this ordinance here at Parliament is number 185 of the parliamentary year 24-25, and the document number is 1093. 1093, dated May 23rd, 2025. I immediately go over to agenda point 1, and as I mentioned, on June 2nd of this year, we received an invitation from the Minister of Culture of Curaçao via the Parliament of Curaçao for members of the Parliament of St. Maarten to be present and join them at the festivities surrounding the celebration of the 41st year of Curaçao Flag Day. This will be on July 1st and July 2nd, 2025, and it also involves an invitation to the solemn meeting of the Parliament of Curaçao on July 2nd, 2025. This document is registered as document number 1107. Of course, members have received the invitation itself. And the proposal is to approve this visit in order for a maximum, as we have established to be the case, of 4 members of Parliament, and each from a different faction, to attend this event on behalf of Parliament. Considering that the first 4 factions were selected in this context to attend Statia Day, the next 4 factions were selected to attend Sabre Day, and the next 4 factions were selected to attend Anguilla Day. So the next 4 factions would be up to attend this Curaçao Flag Day. And the proposal, therefore, to attend this event on Curaçao, joining Curaçao in the celebration of its Flag Day, are a MP from the Democratic Party faction, MP, Member of Parliament from the Now faction, an MP from the National Alliance faction, and an MP from the Party for Progress faction, along with the President of Parliament, the Secretary General of Parliament, and a staff member of the Secretariat of Parliament. The proposal is furthermore to approve the travel arrangements for this delegation in accordance with the travel guidelines of Parliament. The delegation will travel from July 1 through July 3, and of course this is dependent on flight availability. Does any member of Parliament request the floor on this matter? That does not appear to be the case, so this proposal as put forward is hereby approved. We go over to agenda point number 2. En this is de Ontwerplandsverordening tot vaststelling van de begroting van het Land Sint Maarten voor het dienstjaar 2025. Zogenaamd Landsverordening begroting 2025, Zittingsjaar van de Staten 2024-2025, genummerd 185. En de ingekomen stuknummer is 1093, de dato 23 mei 2025. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's the national ordinance establishing the budget 2025, registered here at Parliament on the National Ordinance number 185. Just a brief elucidation on how we came to where we are today for the handling of this budget. As I mentioned, on May 23rd, 2025, the Parliament received the national ordinance stipulating the budget for the country for the year 2025. All members have received a copy of this budget, also hard copy, digital link via email, and of course it's available on the Parliament General Team. It is important to note that on January 17, 2025, Parliament unanimously accepted the national ordinance establishing the National Budget 2025. However, during the process to establish the so-called end text, final text, it was identified that there were technical legislative complications, so to speak, in the memorandums of modification from the government and the amendments from Parliament that would have complicated the establishment of the final text. It is for that reason, based on the elucidation to this draft, that the government decided to submit a new national ordinance, Budget 2025, for handling and approval by Parliament. It is important to note that in accordance with Article 88 of the Constitution of St. Maarten, government had to inform Parliament of its decision regarding this draft. The script for the establishment of laws and regulations stipulates the manner in which the government must inform the Parliament regarding its objection to ratify a national ordinance approved by Parliament. This particular communication, which is required by the Constitution as mentioned, is registered on the IS 1117 of the year 2025 and can be found in the folder of this particular draft national ordinance. To make it very clear, the budget as approved, the budget 2025 as approved by the Parliament of St. Maarten in January would have been ratified by the government of St. Maarten in order to become law. If for whatever reason the government does not ratify a law, its own or an initiative law, as approved by Parliament, the government needs to inform the Parliament of its decision not to ratify and the reasons for not or not being able to ratify an ordinance passed by Parliament. So this, as I mentioned, was done by the letter of the government of St. Maarten, thus completing the cycle, so to speak, of the first ordinance budget 2025 as approved by Parliament. So before I give the floor to the Council of Ministers, from whom we now have received a new national ordinance, Budget 2025, let me explain how we will handle this Central Committee meeting. The members, so the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance representing the Council of Ministers are here in this Central Committee meeting, and the Prime Minister will give some opening remarks, followed by a presentation regarding the draft Budget 2025 by the Minister of Finance. After the presentation by the Minister of Finance, the floor will be given to the members of Parliament to pose questions to the government regarding the draft Budget 2025 per ministry. We will start with questions regarding the Ministry of Finance, thereafter regarding the Ministry of General Affairs, etc. And the sequence will be, following those two ministers, the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport and Telecommunication, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, followed by the Ministry of Public Health, Social Development and Labor, and finally, the Ministry of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure. So, as I mentioned, to be clear, the members will pose their questions related to the Ministry of Finance, and then we will move forward as per the sequence that I mentioned. At all times during the answering of the questions, there will be at least 2 ministers present in the building in order to ensure that the meeting can run smoothly, and each minister will be in Parliament a maximum of 2 times to answer questions that were posed regarding their respective ministry. Even for this central committee, we are going to give an allotted time to the members, and we'll keep it to the amount of time. Usually, in fact, the budget public meeting is a little longer, but for this case, we'll have it for 60 minutes and to pose questions and make comments related to the draft budget. That's per member of Parliament. And then we go ahead, and then the member will receive 5 minutes to pose any additional questions to the ministry in question. The members of Parliament are encouraged to post most of their questions in the first instance after the presentation by the Minister of Finance, if and in as far as possible. And then, of course, as usual, we ask that these questions, once posed, are also sent to the Secretariat of Parliament once the member starts to speak or after speaking on that same day. This submission of the questions in writing will assist with quickly drafting the final report, which is a requirement as it is part of the procedure for the law, and then the government can also provide as soon as possible the note following the final report. And then some general remarks. Factions were and are still encouraged to prepare and do their research together. Factions can also use the approach of creating a list of questions on the budget and sharing these questions up amongst the faction members. We will be breaking for lunch, members of Parliament and the Council of Ministers, from 1 to 2 p.m., during which we will have to admit lunch will be served. We will then have, we have to admit, a supper break from 6 to 6:30 p.m., and a light supper will be served. And as usual, we hope that we will try to stop at about 9 o'clock, give or take, if deliberation is ongoing. So with those comments and remarks, I now give the floor to the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs for his opening remarks. Welcome once again, ministers and support staff. And Prime Minister, I now give you the word, the opening comments on this draft National Ordinance Budget 2025.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Secretary General, members of Parliament, those in the Tribune, and those following on social media, my Minister of Finance sitting here next to me, the support staff also, and the people of Sint Maarten in general, good morning. Madam Chair, we are here today to present the draft National Ordinance establishing Budget 2025 to Parliament. Madam Chair, I would like to give a short introduction before kindly requesting that you give the floor to the Minister of Finance, who will provide Parliament with an extensive technical explanation of the draft ordinance we are discussing today. Madam Chair, we can all concur that this is an unusual circumstance. As we are all aware, the draft budget 2025 was already approved on January the 17th, 2025. During that process, Parliament played an active role in the discussions, introducing amendments alongside those of government, all of which were accepted and approved by Parliament. Ultimately, the vote to approve the budget was unanimous. Unfortunately, we encountered some technical issues during the ratification process of the draft national ordinance. Despite government's effort to respect the will of Parliament by upholding the approval given by Parliament, it eventually became evident that we would need to return back to Parliament. During the past months, government tried to remedy the technical issues through the legal avenues available through our laws. During that period, the Minister of Finance kept Parliament informed, including an update provided on April the 14th, 2025, which outlined the technical issues that had been encountered. We have investigated every possible option to see how we could resolve the technicalities surrounding this already approved budget. However, after many discussions, it became clear that the technical issues could not be solved as such. Based on the above, the Council of Ministers agreed on the following. First, to ensure improved handling and treatment of the budget in order to avoid similar issues in the nearby future. And secondly, to restart the process for a new national ordinance to establish Budget 2025. This national ordinance was prepared by the Ministry of Finance and sent to all relevant stakeholders, including the Council of Advice and also the CFT. Today we are here in the Central Committee meeting for technical discussions. A public meeting will follow next week, during which the content of the budget will be discussed. Before concluding, Madam Chair, I must highlight the productive and respectful collaboration we had as government and Parliament in the January meeting of this year when the draft budget 2025 was handled. In my experience, it was an almost perfect display of Parliament exercising its budgetary rights and government fulfilling its obligation to answer to Parliament, making the necessary amendments as agreed on by Parliament. It is my sincere hope that the discussions on this draft will continue in that same spirit. Madam Chair, thank you for your attention, and I would kindly ask you permission to allow the Minister of Finance to do her presentation on the budget 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for those opening remarks on the draft budget 2025. And I now give the floor to the Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance, Ms. Marinka Gums, you have the floor.
Madam Chair Lady, honorable members of Parliament, honorable Prime Minister, Griffier, radio listeners, social media viewers, special guests in the Tribune, my dedicated support staff, and to the beloved people of St. Maarten, all under the sound of my voice, a pleasant good morning and a blessed day to all. Madam Chair, before I go into my presentation, allow me to also extend condolences to the tragic accident that took place with the bike rider, as well as a week ago, a little boy tragically lost his life due to drowning. And I now heard of MP Lewis and the tragedy that took place with his family. I hope that your family gets the much needed assistance as they can. And if there's anything that I can do personally, I will definitely reach out to you. I stand before you today with a sense of duty and responsibility as I present the draft budget for the year 2025 again. It is truly an honor to do so. Now, I know that many of you, like myself, had hoped that the 2025 budget, which was unanimously approved by Parliament back in January, would already be enacted and published. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Due to challenges with amendments and modifications made to the budget, both from the side of government and Parliament, we were unable to move forward with ratification. As such, the government officially informed Parliament of its objection to ratification because the budget could not be enacted in its existing form. However, I want to assure everyone, especially the people of Sint Maarten, that we did not stand still. In order to move forward with both transparency and urgency, we returned to Parliament with a new draft of the 2025 budget. This version includes all the amendments and modifications that were previously approved by Parliament in January 2025, now fully and properly incorporated. Is it standard practice for government to submit a budget that already includes Parliament's amendments? No, it is not. But this was not a standard situation. This approach was chosen as a practical and responsible solution to ensure that the budget as approved in January could finally be enacted. We will then proceed with the budget amendment for 2025. In my presentation today, I will go through each of these approved modifications and amendments, both from Parliament and from the government, and explain how they have been incorporated into the submitted budget. Because of the technical and financial issues involved, it was not possible to simply copy and paste the amendments as they were originally written. That's why we're here today, to clarify, to present, and to ensure that everyone understands how we got to this point. There were also ripple effects, financial consequences that were not explicitly detailed in the original approved amendment documents. These have been addressed and carefully incorporated into this new version of the budget. So while this is by definition a new draft, it remains rooted in the choices and commitments already made. Today marks the start of the Central Committee discussions, and I'm hopeful that we can proceed with a smooth and constructive dialogue. A more extensive discussion is expected later this year when we bring forward the official budget amendment for 2025, anticipated in the third quarter. I will also present a comparison with the actual figures from the first quarter of this year. These Q1 numbers have been encouraging, not just in comparison to 2024, but also in line with the projections in this 2025 budget. This gives us confidence that we are on a realistic and stable path. During this presentation, the following key topics will be addressed. Budget 2025 process post-approval January 2025. I will provide a short summary of the steps taken following the formal approval of the 2025 budget in January 2025. Number 2, incorporation of approved modifications by government, explanation of changes initiated by government and approved by Parliament in January 2025, and how these have been integrated into the budget. Number 3, incorporation of approved amendments by members of Parliament, review of parliamentary approved amendments and how they have been integrated into the 2025 budget. Number 4, summary of Budget 2025 figures and comparison to Q4, presentation of the main figures and allocations within the approved 2025 budget. Number 5, Q1 Budget 2025 versus Q1 actuals, comparative analysis of first quarter budgeted figures versus actual expenditures and revenues. And number 6, conclusion. In January 2025, the budget for the year 2025 was unanimously approved by this honorable Parliament. As part of that approval, the budget and a total of 7 amendments and modifications were adopted to be incorporated. However, during the process of formally incorporating these changes, it became evident that the amendments and modifications posed legal, numerical, and procedural changes. These issues were primarily due to the inconsistencies and technical shortcomings in how the amendments were drafted. While the intentions of Parliament were understood and clear, the amendments required further technical and legal refinement to be incorporated into the budget. Unfortunately, a resolution to these issues could not be found. Based on advice from the Council of Advice, the government formally informed Parliament that the budget as approved could not be ratified in its current form. This position was confirmed in the national ordinance, which was signed off by the governor and submitted to Parliament together with the resubmission of this new version of the 2025 budget. Since the budget being approved in January, several letters were sent to Parliament by my person informing them of the delay and the technical nature of the challenges. On April 14, 2025, I returned to Parliament and went through the key technical issues in detail. To summarize, the main challenges include ripple effects of amendments not being accounted for, totals not reflecting previously approved amendments, amendments submitted at the general ledger level rather than the required economic level, a number of other minor inconsistencies. In parallel, a formal instruction was issued by the Kingdom Council of Ministers requiring St. Maarten to finalize the 2025 budget by April 30th, 2025. The government of St. Maarten committed to identifying the fastest possible solution to ensure enactment. To promote full transparency during my presentation to Parliament on April 14th, I explained the initial plan to return with a technically adjusted version of the budget, which would undergo full review by the CFT and the Council of Advice, extending the process through to June. However, most members of Parliament expressed concern with this approach, particularly given the timeline and the urgency imposed by the Kingdom Council's deadline. In response to these concerns, the government revised its strategy and opted to submit the same version of the budget, now updated to include the already approved amendments and modifications. This approach was not only considered the fastest and most practical path toward enactment, but it was also the preferred approach of members of Parliament, the CFT, and the Ministry of BZK, as it minimized the delay. The revised draft of the budget was approved by the Council of Ministers on April 30th, 2025, and subsequently submitted to the Governor for onward transmission to the Council of Advice. We received the Council of Advice on May 9th, 2025, after which we carefully reviewed, addressed, and responded to their remarks. The final version, including our response, was approved by the Council of Ministers on May 22nd, 2025, and forwarded to the Governor for transmission to Parliament, which received the budget on May 23rd, 2025, approximately 2 weeks ago. Although the April 30th deadline set by the Kingdom Council of Ministers was not met, the government remains committed to finalizing the budget responsibly and without delay. A Central Committee meeting has therefore been scheduled for today, June 9th, 2025. Please note that the timing of this meeting 2 weeks after the budget submission was also affected by the prior travel commitments and engagements of several members of Parliament. Let me reassure this Parliament and the people of St. Maarten, as Minister of Finance, I remain fully committed to transparency, legal commitments, compliance, and the delivery of a budget that reflects our shared decisions and is executable in practice. The version of the 2025 budget currently before you honors that commitment. I will now begin with the incorporation of the 3 government modifications. At the top of each slide, you will see a snippet taken directly from the modification. At the bottom, you'll find the corresponding section from the 2025 budget, demonstrating that each modification has been correctly incorporated. Please bear with me. There are 65 slides in total, as I intend to go through each approved modification and amendment adopted by Parliament to eliminate any misconceptions about how these were incorporated. This is also in direct response to remarks made by some members of Parliament who have expressed concern that not all amendments were correctly reflected. Let me reiterate, it's completely understandable that a one-to-one reconciliation may not have been immediately evident. If it had been that straightforward, we would not be here today continuing this discussion.
Minister, if you allow me 1 second, MP La Cruz wishes to make either a comment, and I stress the fact that you want to make a brief comment because I don't want during the Central Committee for the process to become a back and forth while the minister is making a presentation. But I do believe that you want to make a point regarding the process, so I will allow it now. MP La Cruz, briefly, the point you want to make.
A blessed morning, Madam Chair Lady. Thank you. Madam Chair Lady, through you, through the Minister of Finance, could we get the presentation sent via email to us at this moment, seeing that it's so much slides and the Minister will be speaking through, and I don't want to ask a question that is in it. So if I have it before me, I could paste my questions as soon as possible. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. Yes, I got that indication that that would have been your question. And already our secretariat has asked to the secretariat of the cabinet that that be done. And I look to my right to understand if that has been done, will be done, when. And Minister, if you can respond to that, and then we can continue the meeting. Minister, to the question about receiving your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the presentation can be sent to all members of Parliament, but allow for a 2-minute pause so that the disconnection can take place, and then she can forward the presentation.
We will do exactly that because I get the point of MP La Cruz that if we could have it while you're making the presentation, will allow us to follow and pick up on something we might have missed from your statement. So we're going to adjourn for 3 minutes and get that matter going. Meeting adjourned. Members of Parliament, Ministers, support staff, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back after a brief adjournment in this meeting to ensure that the Parliament would have received the presentation currently being presented by the Minister of Finance. We have, in the meantime, received the presentation a few minutes in order for it to be logged at Parliament, and it will be shared with the members. So with that having taken place, I now invite the Minister to proceed with her presentation. Minister Gums, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will now begin with the incorporation of the three government modifications. At the top of each slide, you will see a snippet taken directly from the modification. At the bottom, you'll find the corresponding section from the 2025 budget demonstrating that each modification has been correctly incorporated. Please bear with me. There are 65 slides in total, as I intend to go through each approved modification and amendment adopted by Parliament to eliminate any misconceptions about how these were incorporated. This is also in direct response to remarks made by some members of Parliament who have expressed concern that not all amendments were correctly reflected. Let me reiterate, it's completely understandable that a one-to-one reconciliation may not have been immediately evident. If it had been that straightforward, we wouldn't be here today continuing this discussion. The budget would have already been enacted. I kindly ask all members of Parliament to pay close attention as we proceed. This first slide, showing the first modification submitted by government and approved by Parliament. As previously mentioned, at the top of each slide, you will see a snippet taken directly from the modification. At the bottom, you will find the corresponding section from the 2025 budget demonstrating that each modification has been correctly incorporated. The key focus here is the final number that the modification intended to appear in the budget. This number is in the top section and highlighted in yellow. As I mentioned earlier, there were some issues with the original amendments. In certain cases, the figure that was meant to be changed did not match the number in the previous version of the budget, which made the amendment technically incorrect. However, for the purpose of proper incorporation, our focus was on the target amount, the number the amendment intended to adjust the budget to. As such, you will see the amounts of $1,094,860, $123,723, $82,093, and $1,300,676 have all been correctly incorporated into Budget 2025. You may observe a minor difference of 1 guilder between the total of $1,300,676 listed in the modification document and the $1,300,675 shown in the budget. This small discrepancy is simply the result of rounding. While the figures in the budget are displayed as whole numbers, the actual calculations in Excel use 2 decimal places. The 1 guilder difference stems from technical rounding. In most cases, the ministry would make a minor adjustment to an underlying figure to align the total exactly. In this instance, the 1 guilder was just not adjusted. This difference of 1 guilder, which is a difference of cents, is not significant. As such, we deem this modification accurately incorporated into the budget. On this slide, you can see that points E, F, and G of the first modification have been accurately incorporated, reflecting the amounts $3,500,000, $1,095,319, and $5,038,143, respectively. On this slide, you can see that points H through K of the first modification have been accurately incorporated, reflecting the amounts of 495,416, 50,585, 34,238, and negative 5,291, respectively. On this slide, you can see the points L through N of the first modification have been accurately incorporated, reflecting the amounts 627,947, 337,524, and 379,124, respectively. On this slide, you can see that points O through S of the first modification have been accurately incorporated, reflecting the amounts 490,667, 56,019, 36,758, negative 5,626, and 577,818, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points T through V of the approved first modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts 5,000 and 73,032. However, you may also notice a difference between what is stated in a modification document and what appears in the budget. While the modification lists an amount of 5,000, the budget reflects 20,000. This discrepancy has not gone unnoticed. It was also raised in the Council of Advisors report and addressed in the government's official response. I will revisit this matter in more detail in the slide after next, where I will explain the reasoning behind the adjustment and provide the necessary context. On this slide, you will see the accurate incorporation of points X through Z of the approved modifications. These include the amounts of 9,000, 257,974, and the total 3,373,318. You may observe a minor difference of 1 guilder between the total of 3,373,319 listed in the modification document and the 3,373,318 shown in the budget. This small discrepancy is simply the result of rounding up. While the figures in the budget are displayed as whole numbers, the actual calculations in Excel use the 2 decimal places. The 1 guilder difference stems from technical rounding as stated previously. To reiterate, in most cases, the ministry would make a minor adjustment to an underlying figure to align the total exactly. In this instance, the 1 guilder was not adjusted, but we confirm that the amount has been correctly incorporated. From a financial standpoint, there is only one notable deviation within this specific modification. A line item listed as 5,000 in the modification document was incorporated as 20,000 in the budget. I will provide further explanation for this adjustment on the next slide. I now return to the explanation regarding the discrepancy between the 20,000 and the 5,000 figures referenced in the modification document. As shown on screen, the amounts highlighted in yellow align exactly with the figures as presented in the modification document approved by Parliament. The figure of 20,000 shown in red was questioned as the modification document refers to 5,000. However, had the amount indeed been 5,000, the total sum of 3,373,318, also highlighted in yellow, would not have matched the modification document. This indicates that the figure of 5,000 is inaccurate and would have resulted in numerical inconsistency. It's important to note that this amendment was budget neutral. The item in question, travel costs, was incorrectly reflected in the modification document as a reduction from 35,000 to 5,000, whereas the correct adjustment should have been a reduction from 35,000 to 20,000. This correction ensures that the total material cost as listed in the modification document accurately amounts to $3,373,318. This matter was also highlighted in the advice from the Council of Advice, and in our formal response, we gave a full explanation. I would like to emphasize once again that the figures were financially incorporated in such a way as to ensure that the modification remained budget neutral, meaning no extra money was added or taken away, and that the totals matched the figures reflected in the approved modification document. When examining the figures line by line, the shift from 35,000 to 20,000 as opposed to 5,000 may raise questions. However, it is essential to view the amendment holistically. If the figure had indeed been reduced to 5,000, the total would not have aligned with the 3,373,318 presented in the modification document. This is a clear example of a numerical error within the modification document itself, which required correction in order to maintain consistency in the budget figures. I will now continue to the explanation of the second modification. The modification begins with proposed changes to the totals as outlined in Article 2 of the National Ordinance. However, as I explained earlier, during the discussion on the technical challenges, this presents a significant issue, and it appears in several other amendments as well. Including totals in the amendments can create complications, especially depending on the sequence in which amendments are incorporated. In some cases, subsequent amendments introduce further changes that affect the same totals, which means the figures would need to be updated again to reflect the final state of the budget. In this specific instance, all amendments were incorporated, and the totals presented in the ordinance reflect the final total income and expenditure of the budget after the incorporation of all amendments. On this slide, you will see the incorporations of points 1 through 3 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $403,825, $3,024,413, $3,345,435, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 4 through 5 of the approved second modification. In the modification, you can see twice the number 4, which is a technical error. Nevertheless, the budget 2025 shows specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $5,447,131, $48,587,483, and $79,508,950, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 1 through 7 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $60,000, $10,000, $357,000, $664,073, $100,000, $1,082,250, and $1,148,750, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 8 through 10 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $26,023,224, $43,161,036, and $50,726,658, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 11 through 17 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $1,296,732, $22,494,181, $60,000, $26,023,224, $15,000, $58,630,934, and $81,125,114, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 1 through 8 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $75,352,478, $60,110,410, $462,888, $25,000, $32,500, and $1,096,572, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 9 through 13 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $326,750, $27,934,307, $130,509, $94,521,291, and $122,455,598, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 1 through 3 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $40,583,000 and $475,308,966, respectively. With respect to the third point of the amendment, the suggested amount was $582,963,621. However, the amount reflected in the 2025 budget is $585,658,621, representing a difference of $2,695,000. This difference is the result of the incorporation of Budget Amendment Note IS 501. The figure in the modification reflects only the specific amendment to which it refers, whereas the budget reflects the total amount after the incorporation of all relevant amendments, including IS 501. Therefore, the incorporation of this amount, $585,658,621 in the 2025 budget is considered accurate and correct. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 1 and 2 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts $900,000 and $525,000, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 1 through 3 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the 2.43%, $132 million, and $26,023,224, respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points 1 and 2 of the approved second modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $26,023,224. With regard to point 2, this serves as another example where the modification document reflects totals to be adjusted based solely on that individual amendment. However, in the actual budget, the total expenses now stand at $577,255,681, which reflects the combined incorporation of all approved amendments. The figure shown in blue on the slide corresponds directly with the total included in the national ordinance. On this slide, reference is made to the adjustment of a table that was previously pointed out by one of the members of Parliament. In the version of the budget submitted in December, the table related to concessions only included columns for the years 2023 and 2024. This has since been corrected to include a column for the year 2025, which rightfully belongs in the table as it pertains to the current budget year. I will now continue with the third modification note. This particular modification includes changes at both the general ledger level and the economic category level. It is important to note that the national budget is presented at the economic category level, which means that amendments made at the GL level will not be visibly reflected in the published budget figures. However, these changes have been accurately incorporated in the detailed internal budget of the respective ministry. In the following slides, you will see the distinction clearly illustrated. Modifications at the GL level will be shown in blue. Modifications at the economic level will be shown in yellow, along with their accurate incorporation into the 2025 budget. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point E of the approved third modification with the correct inclusion of the amount $10,813,345. As I mentioned before, the proposed modification at the general ledger level, shown here in blue, was not incorporated directly as the budget is presented at the economic category level. Only the proposed changes at the economic level were incorporated into the 2025 budget, which is consistent with the format and structure of the submitted budget for the year 2025. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point G of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $1,051,979 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point N of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $12,634,382 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point S of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $26,455,551 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point U of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $2,101,634 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point Y of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $1,627,588 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points AA and B of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount -212,472 and $30,202,301 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point G of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $2,135,354 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points II and M of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $167,799 and $135,431 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points O and P of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount -17,649 and $2,467,935 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point T of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $1,029,383 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point V of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $101,057 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of point Z of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount $68,555 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points triple B and triple C of the approved third modification, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount negative 10,568 and 1,200,427 respectively. I just want to briefly touch on the advice received from the Council of Advice, as several of their remarks were already addressed in the previous slides. The council commented on the 1 guilder rounding difference, as well as the adjustment where 20,000 was incorporated instead of 5,000, both of which I have explained in detail. Additionally, the council made a remark regarding the adjustment of the 2024 budget column. I want to clarify that the 2024 column must remain in line with the Budget Amendment 2024 as approved by Parliament. This cannot be altered through an amendment in the 2025 budget. Our focus here has been on accurately incorporating the approved amendments related to the 2025 budget, as that is what is currently before us. This amendment is similar in nature to the third modification note, as it also contains proposed changes at the general ledger level. As previously explained, the national budget is presented at the economic level, and therefore adjustments at the GL level do not appear visibly in the overall budget figures. Nonetheless, these adjustments have been incorporated in the detailed internal budget of the ministry within the marketing budget post. Given that this amendment does not impact the economic classification, no visible change is required in the 2025 national budget. The incorporation is therefore considered accurate and complete. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of points A1 and B1 of the approved second amendment, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts 1,440,000 and 34,025,160 respectively. The total amount for capital expenditure as stated in the amendment document differs from the amount of 365,579,652 reflected in the 2025 budget, showing a difference of 4,889,500. This difference is the result of the incorporation of Amendment IS 501, which was not included in the amendment document totals. Therefore, while the amount in the amendment document does not align exactly with the figure in the budget, the total 365,579,652 in the 2025 budget is correct, as it reflects the combined incorporation of all relevant amendments, including IS 501. In addition to what I've just explained, I would like to clarify that the investment related to the Asikura has been duly reflected in the budget documentation. It has been included in both the disclosure book of the budget and in the explanatory notes to the capital expenditures section of the numbers book as well. This ensures full incorporation in the budget, as was the intention of the approved amendment. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of the approved third amendment, specifically the correct inclusion of the amounts 2,695,000 and 4,889,500 respectively. On this slide, you will see the incorporation of Part B of the approved fourth amendment, specifically the correct inclusion of the amount 6,464,171 respectively. With reference to the adjustment of Article 2, as previously mentioned, this was one of the broader technical issues identified in the amendment process. The amount reflected under Article 2 in this budget is the result of the incorporation of all approved amendments and not solely based on individual amendment points. This brings me to the conclusion of the incorporation of all 7 approved modifications and amendments. It should now be evident that each of the amendments approved by Parliament has been accurately and fully reflected in the 2025 budget. While the process did reveal some legal and numerical inconsistencies within the amendment notes, the Ministry approached these challenges with the utmost respect for the intent of Parliament. Despite these technical hurdles, we ensured that the final budget remains true to what was approved. That said, as Minister of Finance, I believe this is an opportune moment to reflect on the process and take the lessons from this experience seriously. The delay in ratifying the 2025 budget has underscored the need for improved coordination and a more structured approach moving forward. In response, I have taken note of the issues raised and brought forward suggestions aimed at preventing such occurrences in the future. These include developing a clear and collaborative framework in consultation with key stakeholders to ensure a smooth and coherent amendment process. While engaging the Teweyo was considered, we have been informed that their current scope of work does not allow for this expanded assignment. As an alternative, government will initiate discussion with SOAB, seeking to establish a practical way of working framework that involves consultation with all relevant stakeholders. This will include structured discussions with the legal teams of both government and Parliament in consultation with the Governor and the Council of Advice to ensure consistency, legal soundness, and alignment in budgetary amendments. Furthermore, we should collectively consider allowing more time for a thorough legislative and legal review of proposed amendments before they are brought to a vote. Ultimately, the goal is not only to prevent future delays, but to strengthen the integrity of our legislative and budgetary process. Through collaboration, transparency, and shared responsibility, we can continue to improve and serve the people of St. Maarten more effectively. Madam Chair, at this time, I would like to ask for a 5-minute recess, if possible.
Minister of Finance, that is possible, and based on your request, I will hereby adjourn this meeting for 5 minutes. Meeting adjourned. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are in the process of a Central Committee meeting, the start of the Central Committee meetings to handle the draft budget 2025. Much of the morning since the meeting has started was spent on explaining the nature of this 2025 budget before us and its relevance or connection to the budget that was passed by Parliament on the 17th of January of this year. The meeting started out with a brief outline by the Prime Minister as to that status, and followed by the Minister of Finance making a presentation about the incorporation in the overall budget of the amendments that were approved on January 17 as part of the budget handling. That's where we are right now, and the Minister will continue with this presentation. So I invite the Minister to continue with her presentation. Minister Gums, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the matter of the amendments and modifications now clarified, and given that this was the core objective of today's presentation, I would now like to briefly shift focus to the financial figures. I'll begin with a high-level overview of the multi-year budgeted income and expenditures. This will be followed by a look at the projected income and expenditures for 2025 compared to the actual results from the Q4 2024 report, including a detailed categorized breakdown. After that, I will present a comparison of the Q1 2025 actuals against the submitted annual budget for 2025. For the purpose of this comparison, the submitted annual budget was divided in 4 to estimate quarterly projections, allowing us to measure actual performance against expectations. This comparison is important to demonstrate that the 2025 budget continues to align well with the country's financial performance to date. While we do intend to propose adjustments in the upcoming amended budget for 2025, it's worth highlighting that unlike Q1 of last year, there is no indication at this point that the budget needs to be reduced from a revenue standpoint. In fact, Q1 2024 showed a significant shortfall of approximately 20 million guilders in revenues compared to budgeted figures. In contrast, Q1 2025 shows that the revenues are actually exceeding expectations. This is a positive signal and reinforces that the 2025 budget remains on solid footing. I will delve further into those numbers shortly, but first, let's take a look at the multi-year income and expenditure projections. Our projected revenues and tax structure for the coming years are closely tied to the pace of economic growth. As the economy grows, we naturally see an increase in tax revenues, driven by higher corporate profits, rising individual incomes, and greater consumer spending. This positively impacts key taxes such as income tax, profit tax, and turnover tax. On the other hand, during periods of slower economic activity, we can expect a decline in revenue collection. For 2025, we are looking with an assumed 3% correlation between economic growth and tax revenues. However, it is important to note that these estimates remain dependent on actual economic performance and will need to be monitored and adjusted as necessary. Based on the submitted 2025 budget, total revenues are projected at 586 million guilders and total expenditures at 577 million, resulting in a projected surplus of 9 million guilders. Please note that this revenue figure also includes funds from the Teweo program. Turning to the expenditure side, our multi-year projections are based on several important assumptions across key spending categories. Personnel costs for 2025, we've included a 2% salary indexation, and a 1% increase in vacation allowance. Bonuses and step increases have also been factored in. Starting in 2026, costs are expected to rise due to staffing for digital transformation initiatives and adjustments relating to job classifications. From 2027 onward, the operational realization of the new prison will also add approximately 2.5 million guilders in additional personnel costs. Goods and services. We expect moderate growth in this category in line with a stable inflation forecast of 2 to 2.3% per year. The SPARE project, funded with $23 million, will enhance institutional capacity and contribute to spending in this area. Social provisions and healthcare. This is an area of growing concern. Our aging population from 5% seniors in 2011 to 13% in 2022 is driving up healthcare costs. Structural reforms are urgently needed as the healthcare fund faces a recurring annual deficit of around 50 million guilders. Subsidies. A modest increase is projected for schools in the short term, with larger adjustments expected by 2026, pending the outcome of the funding system evaluation. Interest payments. These are expected to rise due to increased capital loan obligations and refinancing agreements. That said, the refinancing of the COVID-related liquidity loans at a lower 2.9% interest rate will help cushion the impact somewhat. In summary, these projections reinforce the importance of continuous monitoring, timely reform, and prudent resource management. By doing so, we can protect our financial stability and ensure that government remains responsive and resilient in the face of future challenges. The following slide provides a detailed breakdown of the projected revenue for the year 2025, alongside the Q4 2024 actuals. Please note that the Q4 actuals are unaudited and therefore not final. For 2025, total revenue is projected at 586 million guilders. This amount is composed of the following: tax revenue, 453 million, permits, 23 million, fees and concessions, 67 million, other revenue, 43 million. While I won't go into detail on the Q4 figures, since that's not the main focus of this presentation, I did consider it more relevant to compare the 2025 budget to the most recent available figures, rather than to the amended 2024 budget. That said, the most meaningful comparison is still to come. In a few slides, I will present a side-by-side look at Q1 2025 actuals versus the projected figures. This will provide clearer insight into how the year has started and whether our budget remains on track. The following slide provides a breakdown of the 2025 budgeted expenditures, which total 577 million guilders. As previously mentioned, the figures shown for 2024 are based on the quarterly report and do not reflect final year-end numbers. It is important to note that entities and ministries had until March 2025 to submit eligible expenses related to the 2024 fiscal year, which will still be recorded under 2024. Therefore, we anticipate that the final actual expenditures for 2024 will be higher than the figures currently presented. Looking at the 2025 projections, $253 million is budgeted for personnel expenses, which includes a 2% indexation and an additional 1% vacation allowance. $138 million is allocated for goods and services, $36 million for Social Security, $15 million for depreciation, $109 million for subsidies, which includes an increase 2 million guilders already included in the December 2024 submission of the budget 2025 to support subsidized schools with the salary indexation and vacation allowance adjustments. 26 million is budgeted for interest and bank charges. I will now proceed with the comparison between the submitted 2025 budget and the Q1 actuals. As we compare the Q1 actuals to the budgeted Q1 figures based on the submitted 2025 budget divided by 4, we observe a 15 million guilder increase in total revenue compared to what is budgeted. While this is a positive development, it's important to keep in mind that Q1 and Q4 are traditionally the strongest quarters for revenue collection. So even though the 15 million increase looks significant, the ministry considers it in line with the budget and sees it as helpful in covering any potential shortfalls in Q2 and Q3. The increase in Q1 2025 is primarily driven by tax revenues, accounting for 14 million of the total increase. This includes a 6 million increase in wage tax collections and a 6 million increase in turnover tax revenue. In comparison to Q1 2024, the revenue in Q1 2025 is 19 million guilders higher. This is a very positive sign, especially when compared to Q1 of 2024, where it was already clear that revenue for the year was too high and budget cuts had to be made to align the budget with the actuals. That's not the case today. As it relates to expenses, the same method was applied, divided the submitted 2025 budget by 4 to estimate Q1 projections. When comparing these figures to the actuals, we observe that actual expenses were 19 million guilders lower than budgeted for the first quarter. Despite this variance, the ministry considers the results generally aligned with the budget for several key reasons. The retroactive salary indexation has not yet been processed in Q1, which impacts the timing of certain personnel-related costs. Additionally, personnel expense alone show a reduction of 13 million, largely due to delayed enactment of the 2025 budget, which prevented the onboarding of new hires. Other non-essential or project-related expenditures were also postponed, as priority was given to maintaining core operations. In comparison to Q1 2024, the expenses in Q1 2025 are 5 million lower than the Q1 2024 actuals. While it is unfortunately common for actual expenses to be lower than budgeted, the ministry will have a clearer picture at the end of July when more updated figures are available. These will be carefully reviewed and incorporated into the 2025 budget amendment. This brings me to my last slide. In conclusion, the 2025 budget submitted fully incorporates all approved modifications and amendments as adopted by Parliament in January 2025. Based on the comparison with Q1 actuals, the budget remains realistic and aligned with the country's current financial performance. Most importantly, revenues are not lagging behind, which is typically the primary reason for initiating budget cuts. This approach, returning with the exact budget as approved by members of Parliament, was taken to facilitate the swift passage of the budget, in line with the expectations of Parliament and the deadline set by the Kingdom Council of Ministers, and most importantly, the urgent need of having an enacted budget for the year 2025 to be able to use funds budgeted accordingly. As previously noted, it remains important that we address the handling of amendments going forward to ensure better alignment and avoid the procedural and technical issues we experienced this year. The budget amendment for 2025 is forthcoming, and we are already working on the 2026 budget. But I want to be very clear. I would prefer to never repeat the experience we went through after the approval of the budget in January 2025. Both government and Parliament have the right to make modifications and amendments to any law. That right is justified and must be protected. However, we must also ensure that exercising that right does not come at the expense of the country. When legal and procedural challenges prevent the proper incorporation of amendments, we all lose valuable time and resources. As I mentioned earlier, I had requested that this issue be addressed in the scope of the TWO assignment on the budget process, but unfortunately, that wasn't possible. I therefore intend to include it in the SOAB audit plan for 2025, as I believe it is critical to find alignment and clarity on how we handle this going forward. With that, I hope the presentation has provided a clear overview. I now welcome any questions from the members of Parliament and kindly ask that we remain focused on the matter at hand. Thank you for your patience, time, and attention.
Thank you so much, Minister of Finance, Minister Gums, for your presentation. I had announced earlier at the start of this meeting that we would break for lunch at 1 p.m. I am going to adjust that schedule, and we're going to break now, allowing members, if necessary, and factions to consolidate, discuss their questions that will follow. However, before doing that, before adjourning for the break, my question to the Minister regarding, again, a matter that has been brought up by several members of Parliament in writing and otherwise, the issue of the more detailed procedures for amendments, and I recognize your statement that that's going to be done or assisted with by the SOAB, and my question is how soon? I see it is or will be part of their audit plan, because I have committed in writing to members of Parliament that with you I will be discussing a way forward for the budget/amended budgets for 2025. So if you can respond to that specific question, Minister, regarding these procedures that I am convinced we need to work out in further detail. The processes, especially from Parliament side, regarding amendments are clear. You know, for members to submit it from the minute a proposal is launched, members are free to do so. However, we have recognized, based on the situation that we encountered, that further procedures and guidelines regarding budgetary amendments are or should be in place. So my question to you is regarding how quick can we have those detailed procedures or proposal for procedures to handle amendments. So if you can respond to that, and then I will adjourn this meeting and I will explain until when. Minister, your answer, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your question. As I stated, because we were unable to have TWO assist in this, I see no other entity that can be able to assist, and we chose, therefore, SOAB. And your question is how soon? Well, this is a matter that has been brought to light by myself with my ministry, and we are currently trying to engage with SOAB on the way forward. Again, it is important that we find a solution, not only us as government, but also with the assistance of SOAB, using government's legal as well as SOAB's legal, with the governor, with the Council of Advice, the necessary stakeholders to really see what is the best way forward. Because like I stated previously, I do not want to have to go through this situation once again.
Thank you, Minister. I need to follow up there and just inquire why, given the fact that as part of the plan of the TWO, and where in their plan specifically they have a reference to begrotingsprocessen, what prevents them from having help in this regard? Thank you once again, Madam Chair. Again, it does not
with regards to Teweo, it doesn't extend. We are not able to extend. They end April 1st, 2027. And due to that, they are not able to carry out any other assignments with the proposed, as we propose for this, this budget situation.
Thank you, Minister. I will give my further subsequent opinion on that matter at a more appropriate time with respect to the TWO, the priorities, et cetera, So, but as I said, I'll leave that for another time. I see MP Duran is requesting the word. MP Duran, any your comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you, my colleagues, the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, and support team, and the people of St. Maarten. Madam Chair, just to point out some clarity on what you just mentioned, I remember on several platforms it would mention that a template would be provided in order for us to do amendments. Now, am I to understand, based on the response from the Minister of Finance, that a fundamental right that we have as members of Parliament to make amendment would be taken away during this new budget 2025 2.0? Because I'm still missing the point in terms of a way forward with respect to that, based on the promise that was made in terms of a template. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duran. Of course, the minister is going to respond to, I guess the reference about a template is with respect to the minister, but I do want to respond to the matter from a parliamentary perspective, and that is, and I have outlined it to you, I believe, Member Duran, I think you were the one, or maybe the faction, were the ones that specifically asked this matter about the procedures for amendments, etc. The response to that you should have received this morning. If not, you will get it in the course of the check-in too. It actually came from MP Otley. The request that I'm talking about, in which we outlined the process currently in place for an amendment. And there is nothing that anyone else can do to take away that right of amendment. I don't know about the template. The minister will have to respond to that. But I have clearly outlined where the matter and how the matter of amendments is regulated. So you'll receive a copy of that answer, of course, although it was based on MP's Otley's request. So for all members of Parliament that we get that understanding, not really an issue, but my point that I have been making from day one on this matter is that the regular amendment procedure, which is in essence quite simple, you have a proposal of law and members of Parliament have the right to amend that. And so usually it's the text of a law. You want to add, take away, whatever the case may be. However, what we have experienced is that in the case of budget amendments, where the right to amendment still exists because the budget is a proposal from government. However, what we have seen is that it is not clear in terms of what members, especially MPs, are supposed to put in their amendment. Do they include the grand total, the economic classification, the departmental classification, whatever the case may be? That is not clear. In my honest opinion, I think of just what the member wishes to change in the amount. This particular description should be reduced with this amount or increase with that amount. And once that's clear to me, it should not be the responsibility of a member of Parliament to then go and figure out what would I do with the budget grand total or the departmental or the ministerial total. But I expect this to come in view when these discussions are taking place. But that's the way I view that it should happen, and the rest will be left up to the financial administration. Because what we have seen the last time around is that in handling the budget, proposals were coming from the side of Parliament and government. So at no given time was anyone exactly sure of what a grand total was at that time, because you had changes continuously coming. So, but again, the position of Parliament on the amendments has been again elucidated in the responses to MP Otley, and every member will see that. And then I asked the minister to respond directly to your question about a template, if that was at any time mentioned, and if so, what was meant with it. Thank you, MP Duran. Minister Gums, you may respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, MP Duran, for your question. I did mention a template, but that was a suggestion. I don't know what would be the perfect fit between government and parliament in terms of what we need to do to come together to making sure that what occurred for budget 2025 don't happen again. Hence why the need to bring in this third party being SWABE to really sit down and analyze what is the best procedure going forward. That doesn't take away anybody's right, neither from that side of government or the side of parliament in coming with whatever amendments they deem necessary.
Thank you once again, Minister Gums, Minister of Finance, for that response. I hope, MP Duran, that is understood where we are with this issue of amendments and amendment procedures. Members of Parliament, ministers, and support staff, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, I am now going to adjourn this meeting until the 2 p.m. that we were initially scheduled to restart, giving everybody the opportunity not only for lunch, but for caucuses if necessary as well. And again, I thank everyone for their attention thus far, and I hereby adjourn this meeting until 2 p.m. Meeting adjourned.